and welcome to another episode of The Panel, your official SuperCoach NBL show where we talk all things supercoach.com.au. Round 8 saw Chris Goulding enter into the history books again with a scintillating 46-point performance against Perth. For Breakers owners, a disappointing performance against Tasmania, and the big question that we'll answer today is what you do with Jack White. I'm Kelsey Brown, your rookie in the SuperCoach world, and that's why I want to welcome in our experts. SuperCoach wizard and person who's been here a lot. We love him so much. James Clements, how did you go this week? I hear that you had Chris Goulding, so a big week for you.
I've got nowhere else to go. That's the thing. No, look, you say, I think I brought this up last week, how it's just been a roller coaster and how I think up until this point, my roller coaster had literally just been one of those stupid ones where they just take you straight up. And then they just drop you with it when you don't pay attention. You're like, oh God, and you're just like, this is where I die. Fantastic. This week, however, because I managed to, almost despite myself, hold on to Chris Goulding and then he goes off. He repaid the faith, Kels. This is fantastic. So I was flying this week, pretty happy with the result. Saw my ranking go up a little bit too, which is always handy. And just sort of came out of the weekend having dodged a couple of bullets, but actually having Chris Goulding on my actual court rather than on the bench was a fantastic move. So
I'm very happy for you because I went down about 1,000 teams this week. But a person who sits at, I think, around 190, you said, Matt, is SuperCoach HQ Digital Master. I have to read this off my sheet because it's a mouthful. But best dressed person in this place at the moment. Matt Hickey, I want to hear about you. How did your week go?
Well, I thought I'd fit in with the set firstly, and I think I'm doing it. My week, look, I made my debut on this show, very happy to do so, and instantly my ranking went down. Now, I don't know if that's like a common thing with everybody, but I'm back this week trying to prove that it isn't a trend, it's just a little outlier. A little bit of a drop. The Matt Hurt captaincy cost me big time. Jack White obviously got hurt but had a big score throughout the double game, so looking to improve this week.
I like that. I feel like I'm the SuperCoach black hole, like all of the scores are being sucked down just like around here, but this week I managed to fight out of it. It was good.
No, Matt Hurt had a stinker, as people like to call it, but I feel like he'll bounce back this week. But the big question is on everyone's lips is what do you do with Jack White? He's obviously carrying that calf injury. We know he's going to be out this week. JC, what are your thoughts around people who had him as captain, what to do and who to replace him with?
Well, I had him as captain as well, so it feels like I could have actually had a slightly better week, but I mean, he was the obvious choice, I think, and like you can't predict injuries, obviously. But at the same time, I keep saying Bon Jovi lyrics for Keep the Faith for Jack White. Now, I don't know, it's like, I need a song that's like on your bike. Like, sorry, I love Jack White more than just about anything. He's awesome. He's been fantastic. It was my first pick, I think, in my team this year. But now's the time to jump off because there's so many obvious options. So I think this is the time to go, right, cool, we've got the week off this week for him, then we've got a FIBA break. He won't be back before then, obviously, so yeah, you can actually happily get rid of him, Matt.
Bon Jovi's on your bike must be on his new stuff. I haven't heard that yet, but I'm sure it's fantastic. Yeah, he's a trade. I mean, I think he would have been a trade regardless of injury anyway. They've got 2 singles in a row in terms of the NBL schedule, so it's now an easy decision for those who owned him. And looks 60-odd as a captain, still not a terrible score.
Well, I think it's the Bon Jovi like Dead or Alive, where it's like on a...
It's just a calf, James.
On the horse I ride. What is it? The steel horse I ride. He's off on his bike. There you go. Simple as that.
Let's get into hot and not. Obviously, the top of the list is CG. Bubbles, you call him. JC, you had him. He had 82. Nathan Sobey, another great score for him, 67. Rob Lowe on 67. That guy was amazing from the perimeter. I loved seeing what he could do. Jack White at 62 and Christian Doolittle. Talk to me about your hots.
So the hots, I mean, the Chris Goulding moment was really, really handy, I think, for super coaches who actually held onto him because it actually keeps his break even super low for this week. So if you're like me and you're like, well, I've got some other trades that take priority, like you can actually hold Bubbles for like one more week to sort of see how he goes. There might be just one more sort of scoring explosion, but at the same time, he's not going to drop in price. So if you have bench cover like I do, so you can move Henschel onto the court this time perhaps, and hope that he actually outscores Bubbles in 2 games, which he ought to. Like, it seems like that's the obvious sort of fix for me. Outside of that, like the Rob Lowe explosion was completely out of left field. Having like career high night when he's like at this point of his career, the dude retired 2 years ago. Like, it's basically like saying me, James, go on the court and score your highest SuperCoach score. I'm like, well, that'd be easy because 0. Actually, no, you can go minus. So maybe not so much. But I think it's a really, really interesting one for Bubbles to score the 82, stay where he is, keep that sort of score banked, don't lose money next week, and then you can move off him the week after, which is really, really handy. And I think outside of that, Sobey, Matt, you want to hit on him a little bit. We talked about him last week, but I mean, with DeWalt coming back, with Sem on like a run of sort of, their schedule isn't great, obviously. What do we do with Sobey?
It's an interesting one. He came out and did prove us wrong after we talked about him a lot. I think you can hold him if you have to, because his break even is still gettable. But he's done his job.
Yep.
He's scored his points. He's done his job. So if you have to keep him, keep him. If you can trade him out, trade him out. And on Rob Lowe, super coaches, don't trade in Rob Lowe. Like, congratulations, Rob Lowe. That was fantastic. Awesome. Please, I don't want to see him anywhere near the most traded in, which we'll get to later on. Don't trade in Rob Lowe.
I'm glad you said that, because I was going to ask that question. Do I do that? No, we don't. Okay, let's move to the not. Matt, you want to talk about Matt Mooney. He's an interesting one on the not list.
He certainly is. And I think this proves a little, I guess, ethos that I have in Supercoach, which is trust a double. All right, you can't always trust a single. So Matt Mooney, big scores, comes to his single, and you don't have the chance to make up for it if you have a stinker in the first one, which he did have a little bit of a stinker. The Breakers had a terrible game, as you mentioned at the top. So if you've got a player on the bench playing a double that might not be as prolific, it's always worth trusting the double, because they have 2 chances at it.
Yeah, I mean, there was also a couple of other kings on the not hot list. We had Kelly Lou Pepe and Cam Oliver, and we were 100% on top of this last week, right? And I'm so happy we nailed that, because it's like, everybody get off the Kings now, and that actually worked. So I was really, really stoked with that. But on top, like the Matt Mooney thing, like that's why you should be always going the doubles. Like as Matt said, like this is the thing that I'll be probably doing this week with Goulding. He moves to the bench. Fingers crossed for Ben Henschel, and away we go. We
move to our shout out to, we have Buddy at the top for Tunjay, 476, a massive score. He had White as captain and Sobey as vice captain. You got the Tassie Hawks for Luke on 470. Riverball for Lisa on 470 as well. She's doing it for the girls. She actually had Rob Lowe with 67 off the bench. Bedwetters for Jesse, 465. White, Doolittle, Sobey, Goulding, all featuring in his team. And for the Mighties A, which is a hilarious name, Brad, 464. Lowe and Glover off the bench, which is great for him. Let's move to our most traded in. Now, there's 3 Brisbane Bullets players on our most traded in: Keandre Cook, Tyrell Harrison, and Josh Bannon. Obviously, no surprises, they're coming into a double this week, and they've got 9 doubles in the next 10 weeks of NBL. JC, talk to me about Brisbane.
Yeah, Brisbane to roll gold. That's how it is. And I think the cool thing is, my entire strategy, I think, this season has been to get to a point where I have enough cash in the bank where I can essentially pick and choose between the Brisbane players I want. At this point, I'm sort of getting to that idealised point, but I'm not quite there yet. And then we have the Breakers obviously hitting a double in a couple of weeks as well. So the question becomes, which of the Bullets do you like, Mac Hickey? Because I think when we've got 3 of those guys the most traded in, and they've got the double this week, but then a single, and then that run of doubles, it's like, it's pretty good, pretty smart. And then we go to Perth with their 2 guys who are the obvious trading candidates for Jack White. I mean, it just sort of comes down to who do you like, what do you need to fill on your team, right? Because I think my initial read is like, I have Matt Hurt. Sem, they go on a pretty rough schedule run. He goes straight to Tyrell Harrison. Jack White's injured. He goes out for me. And then I have a question. It's like either Josh Bannon or Christian Doolittle. It's probably Doolittle, but I've already got Keanu Pinder. I might be too heavily invested in Perth forwards. I don't know, but I kind of trust the fact that Doolittle have another double next week, and maybe I get under Bannon in 2-3 weeks' time.
I mean, Brisbane's schedule is roll gold, and I think Tyrell Harrison is a must-have probably over the next 10 weeks. Their scores are a little bit more like that gold that like rubs off on your hand and turns green, and then it's like silver underneath. Like, it's a bit iffy. I don't really fully trust any Brisbane player aside from Tyrell Harrison. I'm bringing in Keandre Cook this week. But again, it's one of those interesting ones where do you go to Bannon? Who knows who could have 3 and who could have 30 in a game. So again, it's really hard with the Bullets, but I think Doolittle is a bit of a safer bet because he plays a double this week and next week.
Yeah, I feel like Bannon has like a pretty solid, like he hasn't been spectacular, but I think he's got a solid floor. It's like one of these things like, what is your super coach sort of, what's your motivation? And me, I'm here for the thrills. You know, to be honest, you can tell by my ranking. You can tell by my week-to-week scores. It's like, let's just have fun. If you want to just make sure you've got like the sort of locked in, here's going to be 2024 Bannon as he gets better and better and better. The thing is, we saw him last year actually score through the roof. So I think as he sort of come back into the side, I think you can look at him and just go, I think there's a bit of potential there. And that's why I want to see it. Maybe it's going to hurt if he goes really, really big this double. And then I sort of might bring him in. But I mean, this is the thing. Outside of Harrison, there's a lot of question marks for the Bullets. And I mean, Pinder and Doolittle's been the same thing, Matt, where like when they play together, they aren't scoring great. Pinder goes at the bench last week, still rips off a double-double though. So, and his minutes have been handy the last couple of weeks. So maybe John Riley's gone, he needs a bit of a quick roost and go to the bench. And Pinder's like, all right, I know like this. And he's got, his pride on the line. He's come back and he's fired. So maybe that lights a fire under him.
You talk about the floor for Bannon. He's had 25 plus Supercoach in 4 out of his 6 games. So that's the floor. You're talking about a bit of reliability. How high the ceiling is, I'm not too sure, but he's coming back into it, missed the start of the season through injury. So I think it's a watch.
Well, a lot of question marks around Brisbane and Perth. They're the only 2 teams on doubles this weekend, so you've got to pick and choose what you do there. And you can keep all up to date with all of that on the NBL app and supercoach.com.au. There's live scores across the weekend. As I said, every week. It's where I live and breathe and spend all of my weekend refreshing. NBL app and supercoach.com.au. Lastly, guys, I want to get to you. What do you actually have on your teams this week, JC?
Well, I think it hurts to say that it's obvious because it's Supercoach. Like when it's obvious, it's going to backfire. That is the 100%. Is
that the rule?
That's the rule. Like if it's the obvious thing in the world, then guess what? They're going to stink this next week and it's going to hurt, right? It just hurts. But for me, with Jack White sitting there, it's a straight swap to Christian Doolittle. And this has been the great thing about this week. So even though White had a bit of a stinker in the second game, his price didn't drop that much. So you can do a straight swap there. And then same thing with Matt Hurt. So he's my starting centre. I go straight to Tyrell Harrison for him. I eat the single next week. But I think by the time we hit I've actually still got a lot of breakers on my team as well. So
yeah, so do I. I have 3.
I've still got Menenga, I've still got Bairstow, I've still got PJC. And that sort of becomes the question for me this week. Holding PJC, hopefully he can still drop a 40. I've still got Goulding. I could feasibly boost and go from Goulding to Keandre. I'm not sure if I want to just this week. I might want to keep that boost in my back pocket and maybe throw Henschel on the bench. So the big trades are the obvious ones. I don't like obvious, but this week it's almost it'd be almost bad for my team if I didn't do that. So Hurt to Harrison and Jack White to Christian Doolittle. Finally, Doolittle's in my team. I'm excited for this.
I've moved Ben Henschel off my bench into my starting 5. Matt, I want to hear what you've got. I always listen to what you have to do. Buy, hold, sell, and I basically act on those. But tell me what you've actually got on your team this week.
Well, this way, I already brought in Harrison last week, so don't have to worry about that. He just comes onto the court after sitting on the bench last week. So Doolittle and Keandre Cook in. And it's Matt Hurt and Jack White out, which I think is a swap that a few people are going to be making. Bit of cash freed up. So at the moment, I think I got 200K just sitting there waiting to be used. I don't know what for, but the other...
Can I borrow some of that? Because we'll
talk about that off air. We'll talk about that after the show. And no, everyone listening, you can't actually do that. So
maybe we can add that into something that you can do later on.
But then the other thing is, now I have to play Pepper. Again, I come down to this decision of Pepper or PJC on the court. So Pepper had the double last week. It backfired on me. I played Elijah Pepper, but as I expressed last week, I am in the Elijah Pepper fan club, probably #1 ticket holder. But because of the moves having to be made and the dual position play, Henschel has to go to the bench as a forward, which means Pepper starts as the guard. Do I start PJC again? And this will be a decision that I probably make at the very last minute. And it'll be the wrong one, but that's all right.
It's a really good point, actually. I think so. By the time we sort of hit the midway point of the Supercoach season here for NBL, and DPP becomes a really important aspect of this as well, because you can flip the likes of Henschel around. It's why Casey Prather, on the Bullets, so thanks to Casey Prather of going back-to-back 14s for me. All right, he's topped out at his money-making point, I thought, then goes bang and rips off 29. You're like, come on, man. Really, you couldn't do that when you're in my team? Literally the moment you traded out, you're breaking my heart. But it makes it a lot easier to get the remaining cash cows into your team if you've got DPPs, and if you've got spare trades and you can switch players from the forward to the back. And it's actually a big thing, I think, for your forwards and your centres as well, because if you've got Tyrell Harrison there, it actually gives you a little bit of cover. If you've got someone like Pinder, who is a forward centre, you can swing them back and forth in case someone's missing a week and stuff like that, and you don't have trades or you don't want to skip a trade. So with some of the cash cows still there, like Lopez, still with money to make, Rob Lowe, obviously, don't trade him in though. Come on, he's going to make He's going to make a bunch of money, but it's just a silly trade. Angus Glover, but these are the problem. The problem is they're still on these, straight runner singles. So Jackson McCoy, Taron Armstrong, that's a big question as well. But it's just we're going to play the schedule at this point, I think, and that's why we're so heavy on Brisbane and Perth.
You talk about people having spare trades. I don't know what they are. I've never had one of those in my life. A quick fire for you guys, captains, vice captains. JC, start with you.
It's probably Tyrell. Like, I think I've looked at it, and you look at I think he's crushed it against the opposition the last couple of times he played them. And then on top of that, I think the other remaining forward, who I can't actually remember was on my team, Pinder or Doolittle. Like, Doolittle has a pretty nice run as well. So it's probably Tyrell. He's probably the most sort of, again, we talk about high floors when it comes to captains. He's probably there at this point. He only had 18 last week, but I think that is just his big sort of bad run against, they played Melbourne last week, didn't they? I think, off the top of my head. But either way, he has like this sort of not great scoring run against them, but in the future, he should be fine. So I'm probably going to go Tyrell.
Matt?
Tyrell as well, and he's a bit of a surety. They played Tasmania in their first game. Will Magnay, we're not sure whether he's going to be playing or not, returning from injury. And in the second game, they played Perth, who are probably lacking a really big body to guard him. So matchups help as well. Tyrell Harrison for me.
Yeah, so much information from you guys. Thank you so much for joining us again. We absolutely love your insight. For those of you at home, like I said, go to supercoach.com.au to do anything that you need in the Supercoach world. And this is the last chance before the FIBA break to get your scores up. I know that I'll be tinkering and playing with my Supercoach, but we wish you all the best for round 9 of Supercoach coming up.